Why do you hate me so much when you don't even know me? And guess what? A friendship eventually ensued, and that man ended up giving Daryl Davis his hood and his robe, and he had denounced the KKK.
Is civility an act of weakness or a form of moral courage? My guest today is Jeff Worrell, the founder of Project Civility and a civic leader who is committed to restoring respect and civility in public life. Jeff, welcome to be here.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you for the invitation.
You know, we've talked about this off camera before, but I'd like for you to share a little bit about, before the Project Civility began, this really came out of your own kind of personal dynamics where you were feeling very in a low place, and share some of that and how you got into this whole idea of the Project Civility.
Sure. My journey kind of started. I've been in a run for public office. This was my third time. Back in 2023 was when the election was. And it was really during that third campaign where I started to realize that, I don't know, just the tone had gotten sharper as we were campaigning. It was neighbor against neighbor. There were just, the stuff showing up in mailboxes for a local campaign in Carmel. It just seemed to me to be harsher than what I was used to in my previous campaigns. But, went through it. I won my election, reelected for the third time. But even on election night, there was just angst and I don't know. It didn't feel really like a victory because of some of the things that had happened, some of the things that had been said. And so I was kind of licking my wounds and feeling kind of sorry for myself and what I was some of the duties that I'd had previously were not happening for me in this. Everything had changed, new colleagues, new mayor, everything was different. And I stumbled across this book called The Soul of Civility by Alexandra Hudson. And I know you've had her on your show before, but it was really the subtitle that spoke to me, Timeless Principles to Heal Ourselves and Society. And I started reading it, and thank goodness I did.
Well, and then I know how, from reading that, you got in the kind of passion for you about creating the Project Civility that you formed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, so I'm reading this book, and I was just reading it for me. But as I turned the pages, it seemed like that there were concepts, and I was gaining understanding that I started to speak to me. And it frankly was almost like, a guide of how to deal with this feeling of dealing with uncivil behavior. And so I wanted my community to see what I was seeing and to read what I was reading. So I invited the author, Alexandra, to come to Carmel. And that was January 10th of 2024, just off that ugly campaign. And, like I've done before with author events in my role as a city councilor, sometimes we'd have authors come up. I set up 35 chairs, typical author event, and 300 people. Is that frankly almost 400, but 370 people showed up. And so it was then on that evening that I realized that my community was hungry for a greater sense of civility and that I needed to try and do something about it.
Well, I think that's so beautiful and courageous that you really took some steps from your own kind of struggle, your own woundedness, and saying, I I want to do something about it. I don't want to be stuck here in my own pain. Because I think a lot of times, a lot of us feel frustrated with what's going on in the society, in our lives. And yet, what you did was find a positive way to engage in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and maybe it was a way of, healing some of my the emotional, the negative emotions that I was feeling, because there were all these people in this room who said, we want to know more about civility, we want to do something. As a matter of fact, the night of that event, I had titled it, we can do better, we must do better. And frankly, that is what we're doing now, as we've created the Carmel Civility Foundation and our programs. And you can say it however you want. I love to say we have launched Project Civility, because I am trying to project a sense of civility in what I say and what I do.
Wow, that's a very interesting kind of use of the words, the image of how do we engage other people. And what I hear you saying is that you're going to try to engage people and project some of your own self in a positive way.
That's exactly right. And what I learned from holding events and getting people together to talk about civility is that many people are confused about, we all want a greater awareness. When I really originally set out, I said, I want to raise awareness. I want to build a culture of civility in Carmel. And I want everybody to start talking and thinking about civility and living civility. And what I realized was that is very hard to do. Some people, as Lexi likes to say, it's not about being polite. A lot of people thought it was about being polite. So what we spent the last couple of years working on is actually developing concepts and principles to help people live civility.
Well, and I think that's a good place to begin here when we're thinking about, you encounter people sometimes who are mean. I remember when Mayor Jim Brainerd, and you're on the city council of Carmel, Indiana, and when Jim talked about when he first came there as the mayor, he had some people who were just mean to him on the city council. And how do you deal with people who are mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and one that we see a lot now. One of our so there's lots of ways to kind of approach that topic, but I like to refer to one of my heroes, a gentleman by the name of Daryl Davis, and he is the founder of the Pro Human Foundation. When you talk about someone being mean to you, what he did was he stayed in the conversation in order to try and understand the person who was being mean. So Daryl Davis is a Black musician. This was back in 1993, and he was performing with his band, performing blues in a honky-tonk bar in the southern United States. And a gentleman got up out of his seat from the audience as the band was getting ready to take a break. And this guy started to approach the stage, and Daryl's, kind of watching him, because that's not real normal for someone to get up out of their seat and try and get up on the stage. And this was a white, a little bit of an elderly gentleman, very polite, nothing to really fear. And the guy starts out by saying, I love your music. I love what you're doing. Way to go. Great set. Can't wait for the next set to start. So Daryl assumes that everything is going to be fine. So Daryl invites this man to have a seat on the piano bench. Well, they're talking and just, kind of chit-chatting, small talk during the band's break, when the man says, one of the things I've never really understood that kind of confuses me now is that I've never seen a Black man play Jerry Lee Lewis as well as you do. Well, Daryl, kind of thought, well, that's kind of an odd thing to say, but, laughed it off and said, well, heck, everybody knows that Jerry Lee Lewis learned his music from Black musicians. Well, this guy didn't really like that and did not accept that answer, and responded back by saying, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and I don't think that's really what happened. Well, Daryl, as you might imagine, should have, I mean, I think we're all trained, our society trains us when someone says something mean to you like that, what are we trained to do? Either flee, get mad, fight, get angry, let our emotions take over, and probably fight back. But Daryl stayed seated on that piano bench and said, "Why do you hate me so much when you don't even know me?" Hey, guess what? A friendship eventually ensued, and that man ended up giving Daryl Davis his hood and his robe, and he had denounced the KKK. And that man, Daryl Davis, that man that Daryl Davis had a conversation with was just the first. Daryl is now famous for having over 200 empty hoods and empty robes hanging in his closet. And that just goes to show you, Daryl stayed in the conversation, looked for some opportunity for common ground. We both love music. We both love Jerry Lee Lewis, got to know him, and they're friends.
Wow, what a powerful story. I mean, and I believe that's so much about, he, rather than just pulling away, he tried to understand, hear this man's kind of perspective, help him to build relationship, because out of relationships, ideas get changed, don't they?
That's right. That's right. If we can keep that's one of our core principles for Project Civility, is that we will seek any opportunity to find common ground in order to save the relationship. As I give talks around, I'm constantly having someone come up to me and says, I haven't talked to my brother-in-law since Trump won, or I haven't talked to my brother-in-law since Trump lost. It doesn't matter. I haven't talked to my brother-in-law, a member of the family, over some political issue. It's sad.
And so with that situation, what would you recommend he do? What could he do with his brother-in-law?
Yeah. Well, so our core principles, I think, are designed to help you not get into that situation. So we believe and are trying to share with members of the Carmel community and others is that the first core principle is really based on our humanity. And so I've kind of created some keywords, humanity. And what I mean by that is, how are we going to come to the difficult conversation, Thanksgiving dinner with Uncle Joe, who we know is going to start politics, and how do we come to that conversation? Can we approach it with the correct disposition of our heart? Can we have the spirit of goodwill? Am I there because I like these people or because I want to know more? Can we have a sense of humility? My opinion, my thoughts are not the only ones in the world. There's others out there, and they're not the most important. And then can we also have a sense of compassion? With those three things kind of operating in the back of my mind, I can then say every human being that I come in contact with is worthy of my respect, worthy of basic dignity. Even the most vile amongst us has a right to their opinion, but also remember there's probably a reason why they believe the way they do. And what I mean by that is, a tragedy in their life. They have a cultural issue. They have a family issue, too much money, not enough money, work issue, whatever. We all have our stuff. And so if I can keep that in mind, that's a human being sit across from me, at least I can have the conversation. I don't have to agree. I'm not going to acknowledge that I, agree with what you're saying, but it helps me to at least stay in the conversation.
So now, does there come a time when it's an abusive situation where the person is just being really mean to you, and where you need to set a boundary, and how do you decide those things?
Well, so excuse me, we're looking obviously at we're in that conversation, that discussion for some reason. So we've got that sense of humanity. We've also looked for some common ground so that maybe we can try and retain a relationship. May not be possible, excuse me, but also um, we we believe that a sense of civility only comes from me. I cannot make someone else more civil. I cannot I cannot change the president or change the governor or make the person sitting across from me be more civil, but I can be a great example, and I can be someone who practices civility myself. So when that mean person shows up and we've done things like being curious, tell me why you said that, or why do you believe that, or help me to understand your position, and still everything is going wrong. They're still being mean to me, because there are people who can have very different ideas and positions than me, but it doesn't mean we have to be mean to each other. But yeah, if they're going to be mean to you eventually after you have practiced good civility, then chances are there's no need for a second meeting. But I believe those are rare, because what typically happens, Jerry, is you and I, think of the bad conversations you've gotten into in your life. There has to be an escalation. That escalation is what tends to destroy the relationship. So our fourth principle, I know I've kind of jumped around on principles, but the fourth one is to do no harm. So I'm not going to embarrass you after the meeting's over and say that you're the dumbest person I've ever met, or punish you, or tribalize, you're this, I'm a that, so I can't like you. We're not going to ridicule. We're certainly not going to hurt somebody. But if all those things fail, then chances are this is not someone that is even worth your time to spend it with.
Well, and I think there's sometimes people in our lives, it might be a relative or it might be somebody who we work with all the time, that we just have to disengage and allow that space, and then maybe saying, I'm ready. If there's an opening, I'll give a chance, but I'm not going to come up and initiate and get slapped down again,
Yeah.
because some people just don't like us for whatever reason, or you have a relative who just really, because of who you are, maybe, for different reasons about them, not about you, but it's something going on in them, that they just belittle you every time they see you. Well, then, you might have to make that space, but maybe 5 years later, 10 years later, there actually might be an opening.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree with you. But I will tell you that that my glass is always half full, and that if you just imagine if you were Daryl Davis
Mm.
and how he stayed in that conversation, they're now friends. I can't believe that with showing some compassion to my uncle, or showing we're the same bloodline, or showing some sense of goodwill or curiosity, or slowing the conversation down, keeping my emotions in check, showing some empathy to him, trying to remember back, maybe Uncle Joe is so upset because his something happened to him in his life, that there isn't that that never speaking to them again is, man, the last resort. Disengaging. I may be naive, I may be all wet, but I just believe there's always a chance, unless we're dealing with someone like Hitler or Mussolini, I suppose. But with my uncle, there's got to be a chance.
Well, and I think that happens where I've known families that have broken relationships for maybe 10 years, and then their father dies. Now they come and there's a shift that happens. And and then there's an opportunity. And the question is, will you hold on to the things that you've been harmed with, or can you offer some forgiveness
Yeah.
and go take the next step? Because I know it's hard for some who've been wounded, who've been really hurt bad, to forgive that person. And that's let's talk about forgiveness a little bit, because I know you are a person of faith, and forgiveness is an important piece of that for you.
Absolutely. Very hard to do, but I have maybe been blessed with a personality that I understand that in order to get rid of the angst or the drama or the just that pit feeling in my stomach that someone is mad at me or I'm mad at them, frankly, forgiveness is a great gift. Forgiveness is a removal of all that negativity and the weight off our shoulders. And I get upset stomachs. I in my role, I have people that can say some pretty ugly things to me online. It bothers me not because they don't like me, but because I have maybe hurt them or I have said something that they are so angry about that they're willing to say hurtful things. And I would rather forgive them. I would rather reach out and ask for forgiveness, or how can I make this right, or how can I do better, etc. To me, that's my selfishness. I want to get rid of that anger and the fact that we are separated as brothers and sisters.
And that is something I love about you, Jeff, because you have a spirit of generosity and a light about you, that you are open and really trying to reconcile, trying to make the world a better place. Where did that come from? I mean, did you? I mean, that doesn't just happen. How did you develop that for yourself?
Yep. I I Well, now this may not answer your question directly, but I have thought about this part of my life. When I was in high school, I was the water boy. I could not throw a ball. I couldn't swing a bat. I couldn't make a basket if my life depended on it. I don't know why. My my dad's probably still trying to figure out why, but it was something that, in order for me to fit in or at least have some kind of a high school life, I decided, okay, I'm going to be the water boy. And that means I'm going to be serving others and maybe trying to show my value in some way to the team. And that's the only thing I can think of, because for the rest of my high school and then into college, I worked with athletic teams, always in service. Eventually I was able to elevate to an athletic trainer, which is the person that runs out onto the field when a football player doesn't get up or basketball player sprains their ankle. I was the guy that took care of all that. And so the only thing I can think of as I have thought about that question is that I just have this desire to serve. And it has now stayed with me in my life in Carmel. And I like picking up trash at a festival as much as I like giving a speech on civility. It just is something that I enjoy.
And has your faith been a part of shaping that for you?
Yeah. Well, of course, yes. I am Roman Catholic. Forgiveness is huge in our faith, and absolutely. Forgiveness is something that I ask for all the time, and it is. And I guess maybe you're helping me, Jerry. You're actually helping me think this through on the fly. But when we go to confession or ask for forgiveness, that next moment is so clean and clear and fresh and new. I really do seek that feeling, not only in confession, but as I have interactions with my colleagues, my peers, my customers, whoever it might be. I have found it easy to say I'm sorry for some reason. I don't know why that is, and I've had to say I'm sorry many times in my life.
Well, and sometimes I found when somebody was upset, I could tell something's happened in our relationship, and I'll go to them and just say, "Look, I don't know what I did, but something's happened, and I'd like to put it on the table." and hear what happened for you.
Yeah.
And it's always amazing at something that maybe I did that I wasn't even aware of.
Right.
And I have no problem with saying, "I'm sorry, I blew it," when maybe inside, I really think, like, you were out of line, but
Yeah.
what good does that do, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And you are famous for that. You literally are well known for being very forgiving and empathetic with someone else's situation. So I absolutely agree with you on that.
Well, and I think forgiveness, and there's been something, I think for all of us, when I was younger, I would hold on to things a lot more, and it was hard, to forgive that person. Although what I realized is they were moving on. They didn't care. They didn't remember what they did to me, and I'm holding on to this, and it's almost making me live in the past rather than
Yeah.
letting go of it. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and so I think forgiveness is really important in that way for our own self as much as, forgiving them, but and sometimes about forgiving ourselves as well.
That's right. And
And
and being able to move on, yeah, and get rid of that negativity in your life, which, the civility Project Civility has allowed me to get past all that campaign, relationship issues that developed and get rid of it and frankly move on to a much better place.
what's the thing that you found in your conversations with people that when they say, "Oh, I want to do this, I think this is right," but what's the hardest thing you think for them to really implement it in their life?
Yeah, great question. It is probably was the epiphany for me. We started out to raise awareness. We were going to create a culture of civility in Carmel, and what I kind of said before was, man, what do I actually do? What is civility? And that's why we've relied on Lexi Alexandra so much to help us define what is civility. And so I'm trying to really take it to that next step and talk about living civility. So we're really focused on workshops and events where one event that we just had recently was the ABCs of constructive conversation. How do we, how do we handle those hard conversations from a skills standpoint? Certainly we've got to come to the conversation, as I said before, with a sense of humanity and all those other things. But what are the skills that I can do? How do I show empathy? How do I show curiosity? How do I, ask open-ended questions or not, pounce or not be thinking about my response when I'm not even listening to what is being said to me. So those kinds of things is what we're working on.
Yeah. And when I watch our Congress people and our senators, and I see how they bicker between one another like children, and I'm just amazed that when we talk about civility, and these are intelligent people, and they're acting so badly on both sides.
Yes.
And what do you think that is? What's causing that?
Well, so to me, this seems to be kind of I don't know, just a circle. I mean, it seems like it just gets worse and worse and worse every single year. I have even noticed, on the dais, that there is a tendency, colleague or counselor to counselor, let's just say, over the years, if you don't agree with me, then I'm going to get mad at you. And I'm just, and then I'm not going to do your next ordinance or your next resolution. No, I'm not. You didn't support me, so I'm not supporting you. And so I try and have a position of I'm going to consider every idea regardless of whose it is, and then try and stick to the data and the facts and get rid of the emotion. The emotion is where we kind of get off track and get carried away. But also I'm reminded of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. Now, from your younger listeners, they may not remember who those guys are, but Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, staunch Republican, very conservative. Tip O'Neill, great Democrat, very liberal, but they both would duke it out and fight for what they believed in, representing their constituents. I mean, they had heartfelt positions of what they believe was the next right place to go. But what I learned from reading stories about them is that they had this kind of rule. They were both Irish, and so that was their the area that they could hang on to. Their common ground was that they were both Irish. So they had this rule that after 6 o'clock, they were no longer politicians, no longer adversaries. They were Irish. And so they'd go have a Guinness or a whiskey or, go have lunch. And there's a funny story. Some of your listeners may remember it, but the funny story about Tip O'Neill calling Ronald Reagan up one morning at like 10 o'clock in the morning and saying, "Hey, is it 6 o'clock yet? I had a rough day." And I'm told that Reagan said, "Yeah, it is. I'll meet you at, the watering hole." So anyway, it's lovely to think that, that it could go back to that, where we can duke it out on the floor of Congress, duke it out respectfully and, with dignity as statesmen and women, but then still be friends at the end of the day. And I just, that's what I'm hoping we can get back to. But even at the local level, I see that creep in every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, and I'm excited to see that. I think there's a movement happening in our country with your project, with Alexi, Builders, Brave Angels.
Yep.
There's a number of organizations who are really, moving together in this same kind of theme and desire. We're seeing people really want this, and I'm encouraged that I think people are tired of the meanness and the disrespect and are wanting again to bring that. And that's why I'm so thankful for what you're doing. Now, if people want to learn more and get involved, how do they do that?
Yes. So if they would go to projectcivility.com, or they can go, if this is easier to remember, how about becivil.org? Either one of those websites, all of my information is there. I'm happy to dialogue, discuss anything with anyone who'd like to get involved. If you have any interest in carrying some of our principles and concepts and our strategies into your own community, we are happy to work with you to do that. We don't charge anything. We just want to see, we're a volunteer organization. Nobody is paid. We have no staff. And we're really interested in seeing if we can get everyone to choose civility.
I want to thank those who are watching with us today and listening maybe on the podcast, that if you'd like to be a part of future conversations, please subscribe and we'll continue this on. Jeff, you are a man who I have great respect for as you've served our city and as you've tried to give some of yourself to making this world a better place. Thank you for being here with us in this conversation.
Thank you, Jerry. And thank you for all the work you're doing and your leadership. Do your listeners know what a great leader you have been in Carmel, Indiana? I hope they do, and your work with your 2 books.
Thank you.